We get started. Okay, we'll call the meeting of the Transportation Commission for May 12th, 2021 to order. Joe, if you'd please read the instructions.
Thank you. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. All panelists, that is alders, commission members, and staff, have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Panelists can also rename themselves if they wish to add pronouns after their name. Please do not alter the naming convention otherwise. Also, please continue to use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak. The name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the commission may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair Kovich, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joe. Patrick, if you'd call a roll, please.
Okay. Barbara Harrington McKinney.
Present.
Charles Miadzi.
Present.
Chris McCahill.
Here.
Ann Kovich.
Here.
Denise Jess.
Here.
Bill Bremer.
Here.
Ken Streitz.
Here.
Bridget Brown. Don't see her yet. Harold Cleans.
Here.
That's everyone but Bridget then.
Okay, thank you. All right. Did everybody have an opportunity to look at the minutes from last time? If so, is anyone willing to make a motion?
Move approval.
Second. Okay, there's a motion and a second.
Second.
Okay, thanks.
Any discussion? Okay, seeing no hands, we'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes a roll call vote or wishes to oppose or abstain. Please let us know by raising your hand. Seeing no hands, the motion carried. Patrick, do we have any public comment on items not on the agenda? Joe, you didn't mention any. Do we have any last minute?
No.
Alder Evers, I see your hand up.
Yes, if it please the body, I have another meeting I have to go to at 5:30, so I won't be around when you get to a couple items later on. And if I may just briefly speak regarding the Shared Streets program, and then I'll be on my way.
Does anybody have any objection to hearing from Alder Evers on Shared Streets? So raise your hand. I see no hands. Go ahead, Alder Evers.
Well, thank you. I want to express my gratitude that the West Shore and South Shore drives are being considered to be included once again in the Shared Streets program. This was very much appreciated by residents in District 13, and I urge that you would approve this. One area that was not included had been considered at one time was this short, the little leg between Wingra Park and Woodrow Street had been considered last year as a possible 2021 Shared Streets addition. It no longer is included, and I've spoken with Renee, and I understand the reasons why. We missed a real opportunity in reconstructing Monroe Street to provide safe bicycle facilities. And as a result, for those who are trying to do a recreational loop, endeavoring to do a recreational loop around Lake Wingra, they need to go along a very busy Monroe Street for that section. And it's dangerous for younger people or for even elderly people on bikes who don't feel quite as confident. Yes, they can ride on the sidewalk, but we all know that riding on the sidewalk is not as safe as a protected bike lane. There is designated parking in that section. I would encourage staff and the Transportation Commission to recommend to staff to consider redoing the pavement markings in this section and allowing for some kind of buffered bike lane. When a car is parked there, traffic moves over to a single lane. People probably don't like driving around that. But if there was a buffered bike lane, eventually people would get used to it, and it would be much safer for folks who were seeking to recreationally do that loop around Lake Wingerer, which some of you have done, and I'm sure you can attest that it's really quite pleasurable. So and one last thing is that it looks like in the bike ped enhancement, if I read it correctly, some of the improvements that residents in Bay Creek were seeking, former Alder, District 13 Alder Alan Arnson, who's now the chair of Bay Creek's Transportation Committee, has been pushing for a connected north-south bike path enhancements that would go through Bay Creek. And I would encourage you all to listen to what Alan Arnson has to say in that Transportation Committee moving forward. I think that would be a real addition to our city's bike network. That's all I got. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Oh, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Alder Evers before he has to take off? Okay. Thank you very much. Did I see a hand up? No? Okay. All right. So no other comments from the public on items not on the agenda, correct? Okay.
Correct.
Any disclosures or recusals this evening? Please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none. Okay, let's move on to item 2. 20 is plenty. Yang and Jeremy? Or, excuse me, Josh, right?
Jeremy went through the presentation.
Oh, Jeremy, I'm sorry. I'm not feeling great tonight, guys. So please cut me some slack this evening if you would.
No worries, no worries. Let me share my screen real quick.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
All right, can I see that all right?
Yes.
So my name is Jeremy Nash. I'm here with Traffic Engineering to talk about 20 is plenty. Coming back from last meeting after some feedback. So after some discussion from the last meeting, we were able to narrow down potential locations for phase 1. So I just want to show a quick overview map showing those locations. There was also some feedback about some interest in additional location on the north side. So I added in 2 locations on the north side, one that's associated with neighborhood resource team and one that is not. And then we also have Tenny, Lapham, and Marquette for the non-NRT options, as well as Lakeview Hill, and then Kennedy Heights, as well as the south side and Hammersley Teresa. I'm going to touch on the characteristics or the kind of criteria real quick, and then go through each location real quick. So why these neighborhoods? I want to kind of take a step back real quick and kind of look at the big picture of 20 is plenty. And I think the intention of 20 is plenty is to benefit all citizens of Madison, make sure everyone benefits. That's our goal of 20 is plenty. And so just phase 1, we want to kind of get experience and also benefit the residents who live in those areas. But ultimate goal is kind of get some experience and do everything we can to learn what we can and make sure that phase 2, which starts next year, will be successful. So that's kind of where kind of my motivation for phase 1 is coming from. So there's also a question last time about kind of how we narrowed it down to those initial 12 locations. So on the left side of the screen, you can see our kind of initial considerations: equity, speeding, logical geographic area, and a variety of street characteristics. And those were kind of used to look at, Madison as a whole and try to narrow it down to a smaller number of areas. And then once you kind of had a handful of areas we're considering, then I used some quantifiable characteristics to then kind of look at each area specifically. And there was a lot of interest at the last meeting in crashes, both in kind of getting more information about crashes, and not just total crashes, but injury crashes or fatalities, but also the weight that carries when making this decision. So I put all those in bold. I also added crashes per square mile, and the rest of the quantifiable characteristics are the same as last time. So looking at the neighborhoods, I'd touch on the three areas not associated with an NRT first. And then after that, look at the three options associated with an NRT. So Marquette, District 6, there are 71 crashes over the last 5 years, 7 of which were injury crashes, and there were 0 fatality crashes. This comes out to about 353 crashes per square mile. Tenny-Lapham, District 2, had 98 crashes over the last 5 years, 17 of which were injury crashes and 0 fatalities. This came out to about 510 crashes per square mile. And then one of the new areas we're looking at was Lakeview Hill, District 18. 39 crashes over the last 5 years, 11 of which were injury crashes with 0 fatalities. They come out to about 43 crashes per square mile. And this is a much bigger area, which kind of accounts for the crashes per square mile being smaller. And then looking at the options that either partially or totally encapsulate an NRT area is starting with Hammersley Teresa. There are 47 crashes there over the last 5 years, 9 of which were injury crashes, and unfortunately, one of them was a fatality crash. I took a look at the police report, and it did seem that that speed played a major role in that crash. No other factors are listed on the police report, and a car lost control and spun sideways into a tree, unfortunately, at a high rate of speed. And the driver did succumb to their injuries, unfortunately. And this area had a crashes per square mile was about 101.95. Then the south side, District 14, there were 72 crashes in this area over the last 5 years, 13 of which were injury crashes with 0 fatalities. That comes out to about 135 crashes per square mile. And finally, Kennedy Heights is another new area that was added in on the north side. Had 45 crashes over the last 5 years, 5 of which were injury crashes, and 0 of which were fatality crashes. They came down to about 110 crashes per square mile. So now take a look at the non-NRT areas kind of back to back. Marquette and Tenny-Lapham both had significantly higher crash rates, crashes per square mile than Lakeview Hill. I think Marquette and Tenny-Lapham would both be very strong candidates for phase 1. But due to the feedback I got last meeting and kind of the importance that crashes plays in this decision, it does seem that Tenny-Lapham has had more crashes over the last 5 years. And so due to that, I would recommend that Tenny-Lapham be selected with phase 1. And once again, I think both would be very strong candidates. I was leaning Marquette last time due to the variety of street designs and a little bit more kind of different street characteristics. But the numbers for the crashes and the Tenny-Lapham do seem to point that Tenny-Lapham would be a stronger candidate for phase 1. And then looking at the options that are associated with an NRT area, Hammersley Teresa, the south side, and Kennedy Heights. Hammersley Teresa and Kennedy Heights had fairly similar crashes per square mile and overall crashes. But Hammersley Teresa did have the fatality crash, unfortunately. And I met with Alder Carter prior to this meeting. She's a alder of the south side of the area, the district that encapsulates the south side. And after discussing with her, she did seem to indicate, or she said that she thought that Hammersley Teresa might be a better candidate for phase 1. She had a variety of reasons, but seemed to feel that it'd be a better candidate for phase 1, but she'd be welcoming in phase 2. I think part of the decision is the south side is kind of 3 different neighborhoods separated by Park Street. So different kind of areas. And she did say that if the Transportation Commission were to select that area, that she would be happy to work with us and make 2020 successful. But she didn't indicate support for the Hammersley Teresa location. At the previous meeting, I also mentioned I met with Tarek from the mayor's office, and he works with NRTs across the city. And Hammersley Teresa was also his strongest candidate as well. He thought that the neighborhood would respond well to it, and would be there's been a lot of discussion and need for slower speeds in that area. And also due to the fatality crash that was due to speeding, I would recommend the Hammersley Teresa option for the NRT area. With that, I'd like to open up to questions.
Thanks, Jeremy. So Questions, comments? Alder Harrington McKinney.
Thank you. A comment. I want to make sure I acknowledge Jeremy for going this extra mile. I really do appreciate it. When you made the statement that all citizens of Madison get the experience of being in a safe environment, and I am absolutely sure that when we go into phase 2, we'll be able to widen that scope. I am comfortable that you did make an effort and you did hear the discussion, and I want to acknowledge that. And when we're looking at 2 terms in terms of equitable and inclusive, that's a language that we use, but we need to make sure that it's data driven and we're following that. And so, as I said, I want to acknowledge and appreciate the work that you moved in that direction. And I'm looking forward to phase 2, that we look at the data and we look at the areas and we actually monitor when we say equitable and inclusive across the city of Madison. And I want to say thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Other comments or questions?
Chair, we do have public speakers on this item.
Oh, thank you very much for reminding me, Joe. Patrick, who do we have?
Wolfgang Reichenberger opposes, wishes to speak.
Go ahead.
Hello, Wolfgang Reichenberger. Thank you for listening to me. I believe speed limits should be set at the 85th percentile of what people are driving. You were mentioning that there were fatalities as a result of speeding. I was wondering if you have the data on how fast that speeder was actually going, and if lowering the limits will really make any difference, considering they were already breaking the law.
I can say I don't have that information directly in front of me, the speed that the driver was going when they were in the crash.
Okay. Just personal comment. It's not directly related to the 20 is plenty limit. It's more around the speed limits reduction on East Wash and places like that. I know a lot of people in the community are fed up with speeders, but I don't think it's the people going 5 over. I think it's the blatant racing and people going 20 plus over the limit. And I really don't see why we need to lower the speed limit when that seems to be the problem and that's already illegal. Thank you for my time.
Anybody have any questions for Wolfgang? Okay, who's next?
Mary Beth McGinnis supports and wishes to speak.
Go ahead, Mary Beth.
Yeah, hi. So I do support this program, and I disagree with the previous speaker about the 85th percentile. I don't think that's a good way of setting speeds. We should be setting them for the actual speeds we want people to go. But I do want to speak about Gorham and Johnson specifically not being included, I believe, in the first potential phase of this plan if we do choose Tenny Lapham. I'm looking at Gorham out my window, so if I seem anxious, it's because I have to look at the street all day, and it's basically treated like a highway. One reason I'm in support of including Gorham and Johnson in the phase 1 plan and in future phases for 20 miles an hour. I'll give you a quick story. I do live on Gorham at James Madison Park on the north side of the sidewalk. I was trying to walk home heading east when 3 men, 2 of whom were shirtless, started walking at me and saying gendered, sexualized things. So if you're in this situation, you have 2 options. I can turn around and not go home. I can try to get around them through the park potentially and have an altercation, or I can walk into traffic that's going about 35 to 40 miles an hour, has a parking lane that has visibility issues if you try to cross from the park. And then if you do have the good luck of one driver actually stopping for you when you try to use the crosswalk, as we all know, people treat this like a highway and will go around them and then threaten to kill you in the other lane. So I chose the traffic violence that day. So this is what I want to bring to the city about why we should stop putting Gorham and Johnson in these like separate weird spaces of quote unquote arterial spaces when they are neighborhood streets for us. So I'm asking you to consider including them in this. Gorham and Johnson are home to thousands of people. They're every bit as much of neighborhood and residential streets as Dayton and Mifflin are, and maybe even more. I don't know, depending on how many apartments are built. I want to represent the thousands of renters here who don't come to these meetings, but have to cross the street every day, who walk to festival and GPH and all these other things. I appreciate we're trying to reduce crashes and injuries, but that is the last point that we get to. A crash and an injury is the worst case scenario. So how are we creating actual comfortable spaces for people who have to live on these designated highways? I support getting down to 20 miles an hour on those roads. And that is a tool then for this commission, for the city, for elected officials, for the neighborhood to push for street design changes that will actually help cars go down to 20 miles an hour. I just feel a lot of frustration on this issue and about Garvin-Johnson continually being left out of safety designs and speed changes. We've elected an alder who's very in support of changing this. We come to meetings, the neighborhood's in support, and yet nothing gets done because we care about shaving a little bit of time off of commuters' schedules. I've watched
Just 3 minutes, Ann.
Sorry. Thank you for all your work.
Can you wrap it up quickly? Are you done, Mary Beth?
Yeah, I think I said my point.
Okay. Thank you. Does anybody have any question or comments for Mary Beth? Okay. Thank you very much for coming. Who do we have next?
Sean Matson supports, wishes to speak.
Go ahead, Sean.
Chair, there's no one by that name in the list.
Okay.
All right. The rest of them do not wish to speak, but there are, I guess there would be 5 others left in support or opposition, not wishing to speak. So it looks like there's, let's see, 1, 2, 3 in opposition and 3 in support.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, the most recent is 5 in support, 4 opposed.
Okay.
I was just talking about those that didn't wish to speak, but Joe's right.
Gotcha.
Okay. You can always look at numbers a couple of different ways, can't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. All right, other comments or questions for people? Harold, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I want to follow up on what one of the commenters pointed out, and I think I asked about that in the last meeting, this question of like, yeah, I mean, we're focusing on residential streets, but that does leave a large number of streets out of this, even though the safety benefits probably would be similar. And so, I mean, I do wonder in the longer term, if we indeed want to have this benefit all citizens. I mean, I think we have to address this point because, yeah, I mean, they are not called residential streets, but we have lots of people living on streets such as Johnson and Gorham. I mean, I live on the corner of Regent Street. And so, I mean, I think we have to consider if in the longer term, 20 is plenty, not only on smaller streets, but also on what we now consider arterial streets. And I wonder if, Yang, you have any thoughts on this. I mean, we did make a change on East Washington, but yeah, what's the longer term vision for bringing those safety benefits to indeed all of our citizens?
Yeah, thank you, Harold. That's a great question. So I'll take a first stab at it, and Jeremy may have additional thoughts as well. 20 is Plenty is one of the programs that we are taking on to help manage the situation and improve the quality of life for our residents. So the design for 20 is Plenty is more for smaller neighborhood streets, residential in nature, and we feel like 20 mile per hour is reasonable for most people. We heard from the public input that some are in favor of it, some are in opposition. But we feel like from a staff experience, looking into the issue and talking with our colleagues in other cities, we feel it's it's a reasonable arrangement for most neighborhood streets. For larger streets carries more volume. Whether we call them arterial streets or by other names, we think it will be a little bit challenging at this point. So we're thinking about using other programs like Beijing Zero Speed Reduction. As Howard mentioned that, we did that for East Washington Avenue, mostly visibly last year. Actually, quite a few other streets as well last year and both also this year. Most people, I would say, I guess not only in Madison area, in Wisconsin or national level, are not used to anything below 25 miles per hour on a busy street. I think it may be possible. So I would say we'll keep that in mind, and let's get some experience with some of the smaller, less controversial streets, and let's see how we do on those. Possibly one day, we can maybe think about Gorham or Johnson. For Gorham and Johnson, I think the Mary Beth is right that we heard a lot of concerns from residents even nearby. They were designated as arterial streets for our city as a route to kind of carry traffic through the isthmus. But really, we have a narrow isthmus. We don't have a whole lot of options. We can rely on East Washington Avenue, but East Washington Avenue will not be able to handle all of the volume, given the situation that we currently have. So I think it could be a long-term project. We probably want to look heavily into how to manage the demand, doing transportation demand management, and encourage more people taking transit, take a bike or walk. So that hopefully in the future we can see some changes. We have been doing different things, trying to help the situation on Gorham Street, Johnson Street. I think one of the most famous example is that we often got complaints from drivers that complain about the timing on Johnson Street and Gorham Street. The company that they are stopped at every traffic light. They think we did a very poor job timing the signals. So the first question we always ask is that how fast are you driving? If you are driving at anything above 25 miles per hour, you will be stopped anyways. So we use 25 miles per hour as a mechanism to programming the progression of traffic signals. So you have to stop anyways if you drive over that speed limit. We're trying to improve the bike lane situation on Gorham Street as well with the project. So it's definitely not I agree with Mary Beth that it's not a very pleasant street to live on, right? But in the meantime, we do have to consider the narrow isthmus, and there has to be some streets carrying those traffic, given the traffic volume that we have. And hopefully in the future, maybe we can look into change the nature of the streets, living more than what we can do now. So that's an answer I want to give. Maybe I also want to take the opportunity to maybe come a little bit more about I think Wolfgang's question about the fatal crash, I think in the Hamilton neighborhood. So my recollection is that that crash involved a single vehicle. The vehicle drive off the road and collided with a tree, leading to a fatality. So I don't think anyone, there's no witnesses, so no one really knows how fast the driver is driving. But if the collision with the tree caused the death of the driver, chances are speed was a factor involved. So thank you.
Mhm. Okay, is that all you had then, Harold?
Yeah, thank you.
Ken, go ahead.
I think we should recognize that this is going to be a fairly self-enforcing public relations kind of thing. And one of the questions that was sort of brought up by both the speakers is if what we're really trying to do is test what are the outcomes if you reduce it from 25 to 20, then what you have to do is you have to do, I mean, we don't have enough, I don't want to say we should have more injuries, but I'm saying the baseline as far as the number of crashes with injuries is fairly low. And over the course of 1 year in one neighborhood, statistically, there's probably just as much of a chance that it's going to go up as is going to go down. And so one of the things that we can monitor is what is the actual speed in these neighborhoods, and does some kind of posting and public relations and things like that actually drop it from 25 to 20. I don't think we're going to be assigning any law enforcement people to enforce this. Everybody sort of recognizes this is going to be sort of peer pressure, neighborhood enforcement. But I would be reluctant to put one of these things into a neighborhood where we already have average speeds or fairly high number of people who are going over 30 miles an hour, and then thinking that saying 20 is plenty is going to be dropping it down to 20 miles an hour. I think, the first speaker is probably right. If what you have is a lot of people going 35 or more in a neighborhood that we want to drop it to 20, I think we'd need different tools other than just putting some signs up. So I would really encourage Mr. Nash and others to try to figure out a strategy of how do we do a before and after, because if we can't really drop the speed limit during phase 1, then I think before we do phase 2, we should at least then be honest to recognize this might only drop it by 1 mile an hour for the median speed, and not really drop it too close to 20 miles an hour. That's all I have.
Tom, I see your hand up. Was that a response to what Ken was saying? Tom Lynch?
Yes, I just had to click all my buttons.
There you go.
Yeah. There may be a chance that we could perhaps look at the efficacy of this program through streetlight data, which is probe data. It may work, it may not, but I think your comment is well taken, and that perhaps we should do before. Actually, streetlight data keeps us historic data. So I think what you're saying is possible, and so we could do that with these two pilot areas.
Yeah,
I just said I'm part of.
Let me just follow up.
Part of the staff team. So I will want to maybe chime in a little bit on that without raising my hands, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead, Ian.
So I think Ken definitely had a very good point, as Tom mentioned. It may not, from just from a couple of neighborhoods with 1 year's data, but there are so many factors involved. We may not see the before and after study may not tell us the full story if we just have 1 year's data. So there's a lot of factors being involved that out of our control. However, though, I think the main objective of the 2021 program, the phase 1 program, is that is not to figure out whether this is the right thing to do, because from our research, from our talking with other cities, we are quite confident that this is a good thing to do, and this does not reduce speed for everyone, but it will have a positive impact. And we feel like if we be mindful on which streets we start with, we can command a good number of respect from good potential drivers. If we do that, these on shorter streets, for example, maybe Gorham and Johnson, we may not get that respect right away. That's why we don't recommend that at this stage. But for neighborhood streets, the chances are we can have good results. However, it varies year to year. We may not be able to tell from the data. But the main perspective of this year's program is to, for staff to figure out the logistics, the signing, the engagement, what works best when we start to implement a citywide program, so that we're not diving into a citywide program next year without knowledge on what works for Madison. So I would say that's the biggest objective. Really, these are projects to help staff get more experience, so we can have a better implementation for a citywide program starting from next year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks everybody. Bill, you're next.
Thank you, Ann. I think this program is well worth the effort, and I appreciate the way that the city is going to approach this truly as an experiment to find the techniques that will work, because I think we have to move in this direction. I think we have to lower the speeds. So with that, I'd like to make a motion that the staff recommendations be approved for the pilot for 2021.
Okay, so there's a motion, and I believe that would be Tenny Lapham and Hammersley Teresa.
That's correct.
Is there a second?
I can second.
Okay, Denise seconds. All right. Discussion. Did you have more to say? Did you want to speak to your motion, Bill?
Like I say, I think it's well worth the time and effort to start. And the city staff has done an excellent job of preparing and identified excellent candidates to do the experiment on. And I think this is well worth the effort. So that's why I'm all in favor.
Okay, thank you, Denise. You're next.
Great, thanks, Ann. Couple things. First, I too really favor us moving in this direction and feel like a lot of legwork has been really well done from staff. So thank you. Yang, you spoke to one of the things I was curious about, of what else are we studying in this year? And so I think, I heard you say, and I want to just really emphasize the importance of, what works for our public relations campaigns, our neighborhood outreach, what doesn't work, what works better in certain neighborhoods with certain populations, works better in other relationships. How are we partnering with the schools and, PTOs? And, so just, I think it's not only studying what happens with the numbers, which I think might not be a huge change, but studying what happens with public attitude and people getting on board with the initiative, because it's fascinating to see that, of the folks that spoke tonight are registered. It's kind of a split between folks that favor and disfavor. So thank you for really thinking about the study from a more like a 360 perspective. The other thing I just want to name is that I do see the arterials and how we create them to be more safe as a really important equity issue, because I think about who resides along our arterials. And the assumption I make, and if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be called out on it, is that there are more folks who may rent their homes on our arterials than there are folks who own their homes. And so as we're thinking about how do we create safe streets, I want to make sure that we don't unintentionally disenfranchise folks who are renters versus folks who are owners. And so I also appreciate, Yang, that you're looking at what are other mechanisms that can be explored for creating safer arterials. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Alder Curry.
Hello. Allow me to join. I just had a question because I received an email from Yang. So can I just clarify that districts 3, 15, and 16 are in a later phase because they weren't part of today's presentation? Okay, thank you. Then my second question, it kind of piggybacks off of Ms. Jess's comments about when we're looking at equity and specifically in the Hammersley Teresa Terrace corridor, as well as District 14, and knowing that that has higher amounts of crashes, are we also thinking about making our streets safe, but also disproportionately, we know that low income and folks of color, specifically in District 14, and it's specifically in that corridor in District 10 and 20. And if folks don't abide, obviously there'll be a citation. Has there been any consideration to equity regarding the consequence, not the consequences, but who may be getting citations if they are found speeding in those areas?
Yeah, that's another excellent question that, again, maybe I will try to answer that, but Jeremy, feel free to chime in with additional thoughts. I think Alder Curry asked a really good question on the consequences, right? Especially in those neighborhoods with a higher number of low-income residents. The design of the program is to benefit them. This is not to punish. Is not to punish them. So our goal of this program is not to rely on enforcement. So this is I think a very careful designed project. When we kind of when we talk to our colleagues in other cities, we really asked about their experience with just changing the speed limit on these residential streets without providing additional enforcement. And we sit down with staff from Seattle working on this similar initiative. And they really saw, they had really positive results and saw speed reduction on these streets, even without additional enforcement. So that's our plan right now. So we want to do that through more engagement, education, and letting people know about why speed really matters. And actually, we have a Vision Zero stakeholder meeting next week. And one of the things we want to discuss with stakeholders is that when we do messaging, what are the most important things to do? One of the things we want to really discuss with them is the importance of speed on our roadway. Why lower speed can increase safety. And so I think those are the things we really want to focus on. We don't want to focus on enforcement that needs to, more people getting citations. I think Alder Curry is right that if we do that, chances are, people living nearby will get more tickets, right? People don't definitely don't want to see that. And that's not the goal of the program. And we definitely want to be very equitable. In other front, for other enforcement issues, we also have been working very closely with our colleagues in the police department. They're doing a really good job looking into the equity impact of traffic enforcement and how can the city change to be more equitable. Thank you.
Do you have anything else, Alder Curry?
Not at this time.
Thank you, Alder Biadzi. You need to unmute, please. There you go.
Sorry about that. I was just going to chime in on what Alder Curry said too, and first start off by thanking Jeremy to actually consider the North Side, after last meeting. But another thing is that, when you think about the North Side here, there's a lot of streets, not just the one we picked out. But when you start thinking about being fair, you've got, when I think about the north side, you got about 5 different streets that were going to have been, taken into consideration, where that has a lot of speeding, where there might be Troy Drive, Willow Road, where there's quite a few roads that are an issue. So I don't know if picking out 1 or 2 streets would have been equitable in a certain location when you have a lot of them so close by. So I was just thinking about that aspect of it when you have so many streets in a district.
Thank you. Alder Foster.
Thanks. I'll be real brief. Definitely supportive of the broader initiative. Looks like you got a couple of good pilot locations selected. I just wanted to share that I have heard kind of a surprising amount from constituents, both directly as well as over social media around this. It's really gotten a lot of attention. Some of that attention's good. I think a fair amount of it has been pretty skeptical and has really highlighted, I think, some really strong concerns and frustrations with speeding. And I think there's a lot of folks who are feeling like this isn't going to help. They're not seeing it. I think, the folks on the commission here, obviously staff, have seen the data. I'm very confident that it will help a little bit. I mean, I think that's what we should all be expecting, right? Is a couple miles an hour reduction, which is better than not. And so that in itself is reason to do it. But I think it'll be really important, and this is maybe something that the Policy and Planning Board needs to take up. I think we need to flesh out our plan for speed reduction beyond this, because I don't think a majority of Madison residents are confident that 20 is plenty. I think that they recognize this isn't going to solve the problems on East Washington. This is not going to solve the problems on arterial streets. And even on local streets, so many of them are just so over wide. It's certainly not going to address the people that are sort of carelessly driving already. So clearly there's a lot of challenges there, but I think we also know of a lot of ways that we can make an impact. So I think I'm just kind of calling out, I think we really need to dig in on this one and come up with a little bit more of a comprehensive plan over the next couple of years of, in addition to 20 is plenty, what is this multifaceted approach that we actually do think we can get speed reductions, because relying on enforcement is not going to do it. And we can bring PD in here right now and they'll be the first ones to tell us there is not nearly enough resources in the world to enforce our way into lower speeds. So it's going to have to be a number of different things, but engineering is going to have to be a big part of it. So I think it'd be really good to get ahead of this and really integrate it into our complete and green streets work as well, and really push ourselves to start redesigning and building streets in a much skinnier and in a way that actually does have people driving 20 miles an hour. So great work on this, but let's make sure we don't miss the opportunity to really flesh out and articulate clearly to residents what our larger plan is on this.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, we have a motion to approve Tenny Lapham and Hammersley Teresa as the 2 areas for the pilots for 20 is plenty. If there's no further discussion, we'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anyone is opposed or wishes to abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, see no hands raised. Motion is carried. Thank you very much. And thanks again, Jeremy and Yang, for bringing back additional information. Jeremy, it was very, very helpful to add that additional data and to do that additional analysis. So thank you very much for responding to the requests of the commission. Okay, you bet. All right. Item 3 is 2021 shared streets and slow streets. So we'll hear the summary presentation, and then I believe we do have some folks registered to speak on this, and then we'll get into comments and questions. Renee?
All right. So thank you, everyone. And I just wanted to mention that I have with me tonight one of the other pedestrian bicycle program staff. You'll see him as Jose Barros, but we call him Pepe Barros. And he is our ped bike outreach coordinator, and he has been working with me this winter and this spring to kind of reimagine and think about our shared streets program. And I am not going to go through all of the slides. I'm going to just give you a little quick recap. Some of you know quite a bit about this program if you've been on the TC, and others don't. But we started this program in response to the pandemic, similar to what many cities did last year when we saw a huge increase in the number of people walking and biking, plus a lot of unknowns about how close should you be to people outdoors, should people wear a mask, should they not. There's just so many unknowns. And we wanted to create more space so that people would be able to have that space to recreate, and they could do it in a way that they felt safe, being socially distant. And so obviously things have been changing. And so we did put the program on pause over the winter. It really wasn't set up with the intention to make it easy to plow snow, things like that. It was just barricades and signs done kind of simply. And so we wanted to rethink that. Obviously, we're in a very different place with the pandemic now. We know a lot more about being outdoors. There's a lot more vaccines. And so what we're really wanted to think about is listening to why people wanted to have shared streets, why they wanted to have streets that were repurposed, that were felt safer for walking and biking. We wanted to ensure that all of these people who maybe are new to walking and biking continue to do that as they start to return to more normal activities. We also saw, as you probably may have noticed, we started out, we pulled some streets out of the program after hearing from the neighborhoods that they just didn't see that they benefited them. They didn't really fit with the needs that they saw that they had during the pandemic. And so in the end, our streets really did end up being honestly in white, wealthy neighborhoods. And this was something that we saw across the country, that's really where it resonated, and that the communities were very different during the pandemic. And they were worried less about space to walk and bike, and were concerned more about just getting through the day, meeting their needs, kids having access to online school, getting to jobs. They were less likely to be working at home. And they saw these things as really just making their lives more difficult. So what we wanted to do was really start to think about how could we have equity as a core consideration in this program, while realizing that we have a lot of relationships that we need to build, that we need to engage a lot more with our neighborhoods, and we need to understand those needs a lot better as we move forward. And so we're hoping to use this program, but also it has been mentioned, we have this Complete and Green Streets program, we have Vision Zero, and we will be launching an engagement effort with that soon. And I'm hoping that we can start to build those relationships and hear the voices and take those considerations and have a better program slowly as we move forward. And, we were just done talking about how do we slow people down? How do we make it safer for people who want to walk, feel safer in their yards? And so we want to move away from these things that were very temporary, weren't meant to last forever, and trial some things that could be done permanently that would make it safer to walk and bike. Potentially, it's also going to have a positive impact on having people drive 20 miles per hour. And we want people to kind of understand what this program is about going forward. And then we've been talking about, the need to study the streets in 20 is plenty and other things. Obviously, with this, we need to do engagement. We need to do evaluation. So we want to not start out with a huge program, kind of start at a level that's manageable and see if we can build this program from there. You've been hearing about, revisiting how the traffic calming program works, and there might be some potential, to trial things before they're built with a new program that is being worked on. And then I think we also want to better understand emergency response concerns. We've been trying to work closely with them with this program to try to figure out what kinds of things could we do that would fit well for them, that wouldn't raise concerns in emergency response time or patient care, also that would address any concerns that streets would have. And so just kind of trying to work together to fully reimagine how to make these streets better for walking and biking and address concerns that we learn about. And also there are other efforts going on around pandemic recovery to activate neighborhoods and parks that we want to build upon and not just work alone as traffic engineering, but work across departments to really build back better and have vibrant neighborhoods where people feel like they can walk and bike and be outside. So with those considerations, we are saying that, our Shared Streets program, with the people who filled out our survey, which as you saw was a pretty narrow slice of the city, but it was popular. And they raise concerns that are real that they have about those streets. So what we're recommending is that we would reactivate them, set them up with materials that worked better. Our barricades, they weren't great in the wind. They moved around a lot. We have some thoughts for how to make that better. Our signage, we want to have it be more clear what the street is about because we definitely heard that in the survey as well. And so we're recommending that we would set those back up. Atwood, we would do as soon as possible. The other streets we would do after Ride the Drive happens because that is going to require a lot of our barricades. So we need to allocate those there, and then we could set them up after that. Then eventually we would trial infrastructure changes in what we would call our Slow Streets program, which would have more feedback and engagement in developing the projects, would test things before they're built, evaluate whether they're working. If they're not, try different things, and just find the right fit for the problems that are on each street. And as I mentioned, this could lead to trialing things for other programs that are Vision Zero or for the new traffic calming program that, you wouldn't have to just make a decision and build it. You would have that opportunity to trial it, engage with the neighborhood, see if the solution fits the problem that was identified before moving forward. So we are suggesting that Atwood would be reinstalled. It already has a design, and we would just install that until the reconstruction is funded and happens. It fills an important gap. And as I noted, we were able to do some counts on that particular street, and it saw very good usage throughout the summer that it was installed. And so we would like to continue doing that. West Shore, South Shore was one of the ones, and we would hope to do the surveys and trial some things that could potentially be installed in 2022. East Mifflin is a bigger project, and we want to wait and trial some changes there in 2022. This is also impacted by the Bus Rapid Transit project, which will make changes to East Washington, and this will become an even more important corridor for biking after that. So we definitely want to take the time and do it right. Sherman Avenue has a Metro bus route, which obviously makes it also a bit more complicated. There are crashes near the park, and we really weren't in our old program able to address those and still maintain the bus access through there. So we want to have the time to work on that and do it correctly. And then we have two projects that we would like to work on this year, both coming out of engagement that happened through neighborhood planning. Fisher Street is one where we're just completing the South Madison neighborhood plan in a bike and talk event. This came up from the neighborhood. They suggested Fisher Street as a bike boulevard, but it has a couple sections that are on the high injury network. There is some improvements funded through Vision Zero at the Buick Street end. And then we would look at what we might do in the other section closer to Bram, where there is also on the high injury network. And then Darbo Drive, the neighborhood plan was done maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I don't remember, but in talking to the neighborhood, we have not implemented some of the things in there, and the project on Darbo Drive was of interest. And so we would like to move forward on that. And then I would mention, I just want to bring it up, it's not in here. One of the projects that we removed last year was up by Warner Park on Monterey and Trailsway. And in discussions there with the neighborhood association, we just realized that we need to do more engagement there, that if we just rush into a project, it might not be the right one, and that we need to have a lot more conversations. And it's not necessarily something that's easily done virtually. So we decided it would be better to wait, do that engagement, and then find the right project to move forward. So I don't want it to feel like that neighborhood was forgotten and we just substituted in Fisher Street. We just thought through our conversations that we needed more of that relationship building and engagement first. So if people do have questions about the first part, I skipped over that. There is a lot of interesting information, but I will end that there.
Okay, thanks, Renee. We do have some members from of the public who are registered to speak, as I understand it.
Yes. Wolfgang Reichenberger opposes, wishes to speak.
Well, not fully opposes, but I just have a couple of issues I'd like to have addressed. So some of the complaints that I've heard around the ones that were done last year was a reduction of parking. And I just want to know, like, equitably, most of the renters are the people that don't have off-street parking. I've heard a lot of complaints about a lack of off-street parking, especially over by Atwood and places like that. So that's going to be addressed. The other thing is kind of commute times. Seems like commute times have gotten worse and worse in Madison, and I want to make sure we're not doing anything to make that even worse. And then the last thing, I'm just kind of wondering, I've seen a few accidents involving bikers in my neighborhood, the Rutledge Street neighborhood. And most of them seem to be caused by bikers running stop signs. And I'm just wondering if there's going to be anything addressed by that. I mean, I've been hit by a biker. There's a three-way stop, and I'm always very cautious to see if anyone's coming. And I almost assume they don't stop because that's happened a few times to me, and I don't want to hit anyone. So I'm just wondering what we can do to address that issue as well. Thank you for your attention.
Sure. Anybody have any questions for Wolfgang? Okay, who do we have next?
Tom Wilson, support, wishes to speak.
Tom, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, so as usual, I'm here at this meeting wearing a couple of different hats. Right now, I'm here representing the Monona Bay Neighborhood Association as the association president. So at our meeting in January, I gave a brief overview of this program and asked for some resident feedback. And neighbors were overwhelmingly in support of the program and very excited for West and South Shore drives to be included this year. They did express some concerns that they wanted me to pass along around signage and program communication. Apparently, a lot of folks weren't sure if guests and other park users were welcome on the streets. So I'm happy to see that some improved materials and signage are included in the 2021 recommendations. Obviously, last year was pretty crazy, and we did the best we could with what we had. But I think the neighbors will be really excited to see some improved signage and some improved communication around that, so folks know what's going on and everyone feels welcome. Residents also continue to express concerns about the 700 block of West Main Street. So for those of you who may not know, there's a 1 block bike gap between the bike boulevard that goes down West Main from the square that terminates at Proudfit. And then there's a 1 block gap to the Brittingham Bike Spur, which starts at the other end of the 700 block and goes to West Shore. So I know this is one that has come up quite a bit. It came up in the Triangle Monona Bay Neighborhood Plan, which was a supplement to the City of Madison Comprehensive Plan. And we keep kind of talking about it on the side when we kind of talk about this area. But if there is anything temporary, even if it is just barrels and sawhorses that can assist with making that a little bit more bike friendly, a lot of my neighbors and residents would appreciate that as well. So thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Does anybody have any questions for Tom? Okay, thanks, Tom. Next.
Nick Davies, supports, wishes to speak.
Hi, I support a lot of what the staff presented and the recommendations that they put forward. I think that's all great. I do wish that this program could be expanded to more neighborhoods and that more folks around the city could enjoy it as I have. But as far as what's in front of you tonight, this is a seasonal program as far as it's currently as far as it was last year, and as far as I understand, it's going to be this year. So, I think I would encourage you all to engage with other neighborhoods and look for other sites. But as far as what's before you tonight, I would really urge you to pass it and to get these plans moving. I did want to talk about a couple sites that I had personal experiences with last year's program. With Atwood Avenue, that it's a very kind of longstanding problem that lane closure fixed. Where bi-directional bike traffic and bi-directional pedestrian and et cetera traffic is kind of forced into a narrow sidewalk at this point. And, closing a lane definitely helps with that kind of throughput. And it also serves as kind of a traffic calming measure. Atwood is rated for 25 miles an hour there. But if you aren't paying attention to your speed, it can feel like a 35 mile an hour road. And closing a lane helps narrow it down so that, when you're coming southbound, it doesn't open up and become more of a highway. With one lane closed, there isn't as much opportunity to kind of weave between lanes and that kind of thing. And I also wanted, regarding South Shore and West Shore, I was living downtown last summer. My partner and I were in kind of one bedroom apartment and we were living and working there. So we were there upwards of 23 hours a day. And that South Shore and West Shore, that route was a crucial outlet for us. So I wanted to point out that it's not just for the neighborhood south of the bay. It really does serve the apartments to the north as well in the Triangle area and West Main. And that's also a concentration of our reduced rate rental areas. I think overall this is a really important program. We're still in a pandemic. We don't have a finite date for when it's actually going to end still, unfortunately. A lot of patterns that have been rearranged by COVID to some extent are probably going to persist. Not everybody's going to continue working from home, but probably some people will. Not everybody's going to continue going out every day, but probably some people will. And then there's just we should be as a city prioritizing and promoting active transit and active recreation because it has a host of benefits, both to the people who do it and to the community at large.
It's 3 minutes, Ann.
Thank you. That perfect timing.
Okay, very good. Does anybody have any question for Nick? Okay, comments and questions.
Got another resident that wants to speak.
Oh, one more. I'm sorry. I thought that was it. Go ahead. I beg your pardon.
Beth McGinnis.
Sorry.
Wishes to speak.
Sorry, Mary Beth. Didn't mean to leave you off there. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm not popular. It's fine. So I just want to
not my intention.
No, I'm teasing. Just express my support for this program. I'm really happy with all the staff's work on this. I'm a renter without a car, as I told you before. I live in Tenny Lapham. I use the Mifflin Street almost every day, including during COVID, to get places, not just for recreation. And I'll be moving to Atwood this summer, so I'm happy with both. I really support this. I think it makes not owning a car in Madison even more possible, which is good for equity and for reducing the cost of living and for reducing other people's traffic they have to deal with too. So a really quick story about Mifflin, about why I am really excited to see this continuing there. Like I said, I use that every day. The first day I ever biked to my previous job was on the Mifflin so-called Bike Boulevard. I stopped at a stop sign as legally required. And the car behind me pulled up right next to me within an inch or two, called me a gendered slur and threatened to kill me for stopping at that stop sign. That is the kind of experience that when we just have a Shero, it's not good enough. So I'm really excited to see this. I think it's critical and necessary. And if there's anything that can be done to make some of these spaces permanently barricaded with physical barricades, with bollards, whatever it is, as other cities do, I'd be thrilled to see that, to really cut down on some of these people who try to use that street to get away from East Wash. I also want to push back a little bit on the idea that less wealthy communities might not be interested in these. I think that part of what I've at least seen in other cities is that it's true, maybe for recreation, that is true. I think that a lot of communities with good outreach and focus on getting them to where they need to go and less on this recreational component, we might see more success with that. I do want to note on Mifflin this summer, I was biking there one night and the residents of the affordable housing apartments on one of the blocks of Mifflin had used their cars to block off more permanently than the barricades so that their kids could play in the street. So that's the kind of thing we actually are seeing people do. And I think that speaks to the importance of this program. Last one, it probably won't happen here. I do really, really want to strongly recommend we consider a bolder take on this in the future. There's been a lot of hand-wringing about what to do with State Street. The reason why people love State Street is that there aren't cars on it. Instead of State Street being unique, I would love to see Willie or Johnson or Atwood and Monroe become a new State Street and support those businesses with pedestrian and biking traffic instead of car parking. Thank you, and I support this.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any question for Mary Beth? Yang?
Oh, sorry, it's not a question for Mary Beth. It's something I want to.
Sure, go ahead. Yours is the only hand up, so go.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to ask to staff presentation, kind of clarify what we are looking for from the commission on this item. Whether we need a kind of official approval from the commission for these projects. I think it's fine for that, but actually, because of the projects at this point are seasonal and temporary nature, so staff does has the administrative decision authority to move forward. Also, we heard the inputs from our residents on some of the other projects. So I think maybe keep things more flexible for staff to consider additional needs and potentially add more projects throughout the year when needs comes up and when more capacity frees up for staff. So my recommendation is that we're not seeking official approval from the commission on the list, but rather for seeking input and guidance. And so staff will use our authority to move forward with these projects and may add on new projects down the road. We may, if we do add new projects, we may bring the item back for more input or guidance. Also for the Slow Streets program, that gears more towards permanent change down the road. So I think as we get more experience with experiments, and if we propose permanent changes to a geometry of the street, and we'll for sure bring those back to the commission for approval for those permanent changes. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yang. If we go in order, Harold, you're next.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy to see this come back. I think we saw the survey results from last year where 82% of the people surveyed supported it. We see the written public comment. We had one speaker who was opposed to the program, but it seems like this is really very popular. And so in a way, I hate to say this, but it seems like you're going through a lot of hoops, these projects that we have done last year, and that seem to have been successful. Like you're going to do multiple rounds of surveys and engagement and keep asking people. I guess in a way, this seems widely popular for the projects that we have already tried. And so maybe focusing on identifying new areas where maybe there is more of that relationship building that you have mentioned required. And making sure that those areas are covered and not focusing on like the engagement process on where we already seem to have a pretty wide support. And I mean, there's always going to be some people who are opposed to something, but yeah, there seems to be very widespread support. A couple of questions. So can you maybe describe a little bit, Renee? You mentioned the improvements to last year with the barricades, with the signage. Can you say a little bit more about that? Then the second question that I have is, can you say about the new projects on Fisher Street and Darbo, what those are going to look like? I mean, are they going to be like, fully closed, or are they just going to have signage like no through traffic? So that would be good to get some more detail on that. And then finally, Alder Evers at the beginning of the meeting mentioned that question about Monroe Street and that connection. And I think he alluded to, like you explained, why that's not possible. So it might be helpful for the commission to also understand that, because, I mean, this is a long identified gap. And yeah, there doesn't seem to be any resolution in the future. And so it would be good to hear about that. Thank you.
Sure. So, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Renee.
Okay. So first, signing and marking. So last year we just had barricades that blew around a lot in the winds and moved around a lot. And so, required a lot of revisiting and replacement. So we're looking at some things that, would be either barrels or some bollards that would be more attached. And so we wouldn't have to they wouldn't be moving around all the time. They would be much more stable. Last year, the ones on West Shore and South Shore, a lot of wind gusts, and they ended up a lot of places. So we want to avoid that. So our assistant traffic engineer, Mark Winter, has been looking at some other products that would just be a little bit more durable and safe. And that was just something too that we heard from emergency services, that they just would be in very random locations sometimes that were unexpected to them, and that was not the, so we want to address that. And then the signs, we just they weren't really very clear. They were just sort of a standard traffic sign slapped on it, and we want to create a sign that kind of explains what's going on with the street, that it's and you need to, that it's for residents can travel on the street, people getting to those homes, but to expect people walking and biking in the street. So we want to put something up that works a little bit better for that explanation purpose, because we heard that a lot in the feedback. And then number 2 question.
Fisher and Darbo.
Oh, Fisher and Darbo. Yes. So a lot of what we want to do there is really just trial traffic calming kinds of things, less than signs that just say the street is for walking and biking, not for through travel. You'll see later in the presentation, we do have some funding for a bike boulevard on Fisher Street. And so what we would be doing is testing some things that would ultimately lead to slower travel, more comfortable walking and biking, intersection concerns that we got through the planning process. So very different than what you see on the other streets that we did last year. It would be much more pop up, quick curb, maybe kinds of things, testing things, seeing if they are working for the issues that have been identified. And then the third, Monroe Street. Yes, I remember that one. So, our new program, really, we're looking at trying to test things that will lean towards having permanent changes. So, obviously, some of you probably know Monroe Street was just fully reconstructed in 2018. It had a very large engagement process. And so, in talking to him, with that focus, that street was just reconstructed. And so, are we looking to make changes to it now? I guess that is the question that's out there. In making that change, are we looking at, okay, it's 3 years later, now we want to do something to change the parking or the peak period lane or take down the trees to widen the sidewalk? I mean, I guess that's one of the issues that is unresolved with that particular, if we use Monroe Street as the answer to the Lake Wingber connection. So that's why.
Thank you.
Yeah, another thing I want to add to Monroe Street is that we are also actively looking at a different route more connecting the end of Vilas Park Pleasure Drive, the Pleasure Drive, to directly to Wingwell Park, closer to the lake, so that folks does not have to use the street and goes all the way to Monroe Street and come back. So that is in works as well.
Okay, thank you. Alder Miadzi.
I was just curious, is there any analysis or do you have any data according to the demographic picture of who fills out these surveys? And also, too, if you could just touch on some of your outreach when you're getting these surveys done.
Sure. So in the presentation, let me see. I'm just going to share my screen here quick again. Here we go. So as I mentioned, the demographics definitely trended a certain way. 84% of the people who filled out the survey were white. Most of the people filled it out in English and predominantly in the 53703 zip code. Mix of people reporting female and male, but definitely it skewed that, that is who filled out the survey that we did online. We did not have a lot of staff time for a lot of additional outreach, but Pepe did have some conversations. We had some contacts originally from when we removed the one at Clyde Gallagher and the one near Warner Park on Trails Way in Monterey. And so he was able to have some conversations. And I think that's when we decided, in talking to the Brentwood Neighborhood Association president, who kind of worked with us when we opted to remove Monterey and Trails Way from the program, that it was best not to rush into a new project and that we needed to do more in-person, not online outreach to the apartment buildings that lived in that area to really find a project and build a relationship to find something that would really well meet the needs of the department.
Yeah, so Renee, do you also want to talk about outreach for the survey?
Sure. So the outreach survey was not massive. We sent it out. We did a press release. It was in some news reports. That's probably the number one way that it got out, was just through the press release. We, did some social media, city newsletters, but we did not personally go out to the neighborhoods. And we shared it with NRTs, but I don't know how widely it got out from there. So I would say really the press release and the coverage that it got was the number one way that people heard about it. And probably, I'm pretty sure that some of the neighborhoods that had it, based on the number of people who filled it out from certain zip codes, were sharing it the most. And that was really how we got the most results.
Just out of curiosity, do you share it with alders too, their surveys? Because that's one way that,
Yeah, I believe I know that we sent the press release to all alders. It hasn't been a while, but I'm sure that they would have gotten the press release on it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I did reach out to all the alders and I shared the links with all the alders at the time.
Okay, is that all? Is that all you had, Alder Miadzi?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Pepe?
Yes, thank you. And I just wanted to quickly add that in addition to all the work that Renee presented, we have also been in contact with emergency respondents, in particular with the fire department, because some of them have expressed their concerns in terms of how these programs will be implemented. So we have had a couple of meetings with them already, and we are in touch with them, and we're hoping to go through them as we set up some alternative responses or designs to the new parts, as Harold was asking. There's nothing really set up in terms of what it's going to look like, but that's the idea of this program, the Slow Streets program, to be a flexible program that we can use for trial different options and get active feedback from the neighbors as we have those options set up. So yeah, just wanted to add that point that we are taking care of the emergency response concerns.
Great, thank you. Alder Harrington McKinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are we still in questions of staff, or we are into discussion?
We're doing both actually right now. This is a review and recommendation. As Yang said, we don't really have to have a motion on this because these are temporary right now. And if there are permanent changes that are recommended, they would need to come back to the TC for approval. Is that correct, Yang?
That is correct.
Oh, okay, then I can make comments, and I just didn't want to be out of order.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
First, recognizing I am new to this commission and not had the background as some of you, and so I acknowledge that. I'm going to put my biases up front so that could be taken in consideration, my comment. And what is before us tonight, really, I'm sorry, doesn't really excite me. And I need to be honest with that, because when I look at 93% of the responders and only 7% who identified themselves as non-white, gives me pause. The second thing that I am really drilling on is that we use throughout our reports equity as a consideration. And sometimes when we use these words, they're not buzzwords. When we use equity as a consideration and inclusion, those are words that really should go through all of our decisions and all of our work on the transportation. The third thing is when I looked at the report, I looked at the areas being considered, Vilas Park Drive, Atwood Avenue, at Olbrich, East Mifflin, West Shore, South Shore, Sherman, zip codes 53703, 04, 15, 11, and 16. And again, 93% of the responders are excited about the program, and only 7% were contacted and added value or added some kind of comment related to these projects. And so as we move forward, and I have to acknowledge Renee, because when I first read the report and then continued to read the report, it was clear acknowledgement that there is work to be done and there are things that are missing. And I recognize that. And so I'm looking at the report differently because they identified and raised up many of the questions that I would have in the report. And so as we move forward and how we're allocating and doing our business in the future, this is a good what's missing out of the report, and how do we do active community engagement. Online does not work. Press releases don't work. All in English don't work. And so the larger question is that when we say, and I've said it in many spaces that I've said in, is that when we talk about community engagement, we really are not actively doing community engagement, and it looks different as you are, if you really want to get the input of individuals that are not 94, 93%, of the major population. We have to look at and do community engagement differently. So as we make a report, we are actually going to the people where they are and getting their input. And so, as I said, I put my biases out front in terms of what I read in the report, but I also acknowledge that Renee said up front is that these are the pieces that are missing, and we must do a better job at how we do community engagement. And for that, I'm very appreciative, and I accept that report with those caveats in it.
Thank you very much, Alder. Other comments or questions? There were a lot of suggestions that we received by email. We heard from Alder Evers. We heard from speakers. And Renee, I know how inclusive you are, that you'll be taking those and looking at them and seeing what you might be able to do in the future with those suggestions. Are there any other comments? This was, successful in what we tried to do last year. Everyone wants to see it come back again. And I think everyone's been talking about the idea of maybe making some of these things permanent. And we'll be interested in seeing about that, as well as some of the trials you're talking about, Renee, some of the things that we can experiment with. So Renee, any last comments?
No, just, obviously as this moves forward, it can come back and give some reports. And, I definitely really appreciate the comments from Alder Harrington McKinney. I think this was popular, but it was with a section of the city, and that we can, and that we're going to strive to do better as we move forward with this program and try to really address the things that we saw that could be better, and that really left a lot of people out of this program and the benefits of it.
Okay, great. Any other recommendations? We appreciate the opportunity to hear about it, and we'll look forward to hearing about more updates, Renee. Thank you very much. Hey. Tom Moore, Neighborhood Traffic Management Program.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, Tom Moore, City Traffic Engineering, returning with Wheeler Road. I'll share my screen. So I think we've kind of figured out every project for traffic calming except for Wheeler Road. And I can't remember if we officially approved these two over here or not, but these were the three separate names. We did? Okay, so I'll just concentrate.
The two with green check marks have been approved. Okay. The one with the red X has not been approved yet.
Okay, so we had a neighborhood meeting on Monday with Alder Miadzi. About 50 people attended that meeting. We went through the background of Wheeler Road, the entire project, the proposal, and the results of the survey. So concentrating on this section between Comanche and Sherman. So we mailed out 399 surveys. We received 163 back to us. The approval rate was just below 60%, which is what we typically ask for to move forward with a project. We included some documents attached to this agenda item, some of the survey responses, but I'll concentrate on what was discussed at the neighborhood meeting on Monday. Overall, and Alder Miadzi can give his input too if I'm off a little bit, but overall it seemed like of the 50 people that attended that meeting, there were definite concerns of speed on Wheeler Road, and especially with this section. It seemed like most people would be disappointed if nothing were done. The overall impression was that the proposal was probably too many islands were proposed. They felt that if there were fewer islands, there would have been a better chance of approval. And the final thing that it seemed like most of the people at the meeting agreed on was that they wanted an all-way stop at Comanche and Wheeler. We talked about fire emergency response. Chief Davis from the fire department was there as a resident and as the fire chief. They mentioned that there's 1 to 2 calls, emergency response calls in this area per day, which was surprising that it's that high, but that's what it is. So a definite no to speed humps, that would increase response times to a minute or 2 in response times to calls in this area. So overall, we're kind of here to have a discussion to try to figure out how to move forward with this. Now knowing the results of the survey and the responses and the discussion that we had at the neighborhood meeting, I think as staff, according to the METCD, we should not move forward with an always stop, at least without doing an engineering study of this intersection. We have not done that. We don't have turning movement counts there. We would at least collect turning movement counts at the Comanche intersection and perform a study. The METCD states that stop signs should not be installed for traffic calming or in an attempt to slow speeds. I would just say up front, there's a very low likelihood that it's going to meet the warrants for an always stop. But and I'll mention how we got the feedback at the meeting. We asked people to raise their hands if they were in favor of an always stop there, and 17 people is what I counted raise their hands. And then we asked if anyone was against it, and 2 people raised their hands. It just seemed like the majority of people, at least at the meeting, were in favor of an always stop there. I think I'll leave it at that and let you ask questions, and maybe Alderman Yazzie wants to add his input from the meeting.
Why don't we hear from Alderman Yazzie? And Tom, I would like to also get your recommendation and your comments on, there was a proposal that was emailed to us from the resident. Did you have a chance to see that?
Yes.
Yeah. So Alderman Yazzie, do you want to give your feedback on the neighborhood meeting? And then we'll come back to you, Ken, after we hear from Alderman Yazzie and Tom's recommendation.
Oh, well, a couple of things that come to my mind. I guess from hearing from a lot of the residents, a lot of them thought that more of a survey should have probably been, or assessment should have been given, because a lot of people did not get it. So I think that if we'd have had a higher rate, because Cherokee is where most of the residents live in the Northside District. We've got hundreds of people that live in the condominiums, hundreds of people that live in Cherokee itself. So I think it'll have been more. I don't think enough people were outreached. Secondly, I think if we were to go ahead in the 2 locations that were approved without doing something in one of the highest places lived on Comanche and Willard Road, I think we would be doing a disservice to the people of the Cherokee, which has a higher density than the rest of the neighborhood. Because as anybody knows, if anybody's speeding through, using it as a corridor to speed through, and you've got a lower population of people putting speed humps, then when you get up to the Cherokee and the Wheeler Road right there, that has not been approved, people are going to be making up speed during that corridor, and that's going to be the most detrimental, tragic spot. So I think it's important that we I don't know. I would advise trying to see what we can definitely do with that corridor, which is the most highest entryway into the Cherokee entry. So I don't know what people think, but I think a lot of residents touched on that spot right there is the most spot that should be looked at.
Tom, did you want to make a recommendation now, or did you want to wait to hear from other people first?
We can hear from other people. Yeah.
Okay, Ken, go ahead.
Well, first of all, Tom, thanks for this. If you were to go from 5 to 4, where would the island be that you would pull? Would you move the one that is sort of, as if we're moving east or west from Sherman, would you, just tell me where the options would be if you would drop one island off?
Yeah, so I think the most opposition we received to an individual island would be the furthest east one.
And what was the reason for the opposition? That was blocking driveways and things like that?
Yep, too close to this driveway, too close to the intersection for that. Otherwise,
if you drop that one and then move the one that is just to the west a little bit further east, would that help settle things down so that you don't have sprint car races between the island and Sherman?
Yeah. I guess that's the question. I don't know if removing just one island is enough. I think I would lean more towards the response that was given of removing one of the email responses that was attached to this item on the agenda. I think they recommended removing 2 of the islands. I think we had a specific request. I'm not sure if it was the same person, but in the mail-in survey of removing 2 of the islands.
She says, in conjunction with my next suggestion, I would propose that just one island be installed on Wheeler Road so that elderly visitors from Wickham Senior Living and gardeners in the community garden can cross to sidewalks on the north side of Wheeler Road. And then the all-way stop.
Right. Yep.
Or four-way stop. Yeah.
And one other thing I should mention with these island locations, we kind of place them to avoid bus stops. And that's kind of another thing that's a little up in the air. Right now, there are no bus routes on Wheeler, but the feedback we received from Metro Transit was that there's a good possibility that bus routes would return at some point. So the dash lines are shown where bus stops were located, but they're not there right now. And I think there were other comments about crossing Wheeler. And as you can see, there's only on the south side, there's only this little stretch of sidewalk here. So we wouldn't put a crosswalk in without adding sidewalk or pedestrian ramps. So that's another thing to consider. But so that is, I guess these gardens are kind of like a destination for people in the neighborhood. So.
And I can't see if other people's hands are up if they want to make comments, but I'd be ready to make a motion.
Well, Harold has his hand up.
Okay.
So why don't we hear from Harold first? And then I would like to hear what Tom recommends. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I guess I'm just feeling somewhat uncomfortable with this process of we kind of make these minor adjustments under the assumption that if we do 4.5, then maybe we would get to support of 65%. If we do 3, we get a little bit more support rather than really focusing on what the outcome is supposed to be. And so, I mean, in whatever I don't really know what the solution here is, because I mean, clearly we have criteria for what kind of petition support we need to get, and that wasn't met. But at the same time, it is an identified safety issue. So I just wanted to express my discomfort with this, like, oh yeah, let's move a little bit here, let's move a little bit there, without having a clear connection to what the goal here is. And we can conjecture whether, like, you know, removing that one island would have pushed this over the threshold for support or not. Who knows? I mean, maybe once you move it a little bit over, then you make other people angry because it's too close to whatever they care about. So I don't know. It's tricky. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really important for us to understand the goal, and I'm just going to remind everybody of the impact. Alder Miadzi talked about it earlier, and we have, and the former Alder Kemble talked about it too, that if we don't do something on all of Wheeler Road, are we really accomplishing safety and accomplishing the goals that we want if we don't address safety on the whole stretch? So Ken, go ahead.
Well, I would propose that we adopt the plan as we're looking at it right now on the shared screen, and not moving any of the islands or anything like that. I think while it is, you know, we're not violating any ordinance or law by approving something that is a fraction of a percent less than 60%. And I think the overall strategy is a good, well thought out thing by Tom and others. I fully recognize that there's probably ways to tweak it. I don't think a stop sign is a way to tweak it. And anyway, so that's my proposal, that we adopt what we're seeing on the screen right now.
Okay, so there's a motion to approve the original proposal, even though it didn't quite get enough support from those people who were surveyed. Is there a second? Alder Miadzi? You're muted, sir.
Before we go ahead and do that, can I just ask Tom a quick question? And my question will be, given on the history of how people use, because we talked about this, about the Vilas Zoo, but let me get away from that. But let's talk about the question I have for him is that when people use a street for a main corridor as a cut through, if we address the parts that was approved without talking about the main corridor into Cherokee, which kids cross the road at that point, we know that a lot of traffickers speed up toward the tail end of their cut through route to make up for lost time. If we go ahead and start the approval process on other two locations without talking about the main corridor, which kids cross the street, and address a calming situation, we have just defeated the whole purpose. So before we approve to start process and think about later on, my question is that a bad thing to approve the other two and leave the other part that could be later on a fatality down the line?
I think that's addressed to you, Tom. Go ahead.
Sure, yeah, thanks. I kind of mentioned this at the neighborhood meeting, but some of the feedback that we've received, and unrelated, not directly related to this survey, but prior to this survey, was that Wheeler Road is used as a cut-through route between County CV and Northport Drive. So traffic from east to west would use Wheeler to all the way to Kennedy Road and down. And same thing, west to east. So I think part of the hope is that with installing the speed humps along these two sections west of Comanche, that would cut down on that cut through traffic. I would be surprised that there would be an increase in traffic or an increase in speeding with these projects added. I think that if anything, that would dissuade people from using this. But again, that's just my thought, not really based on anything other than intuition. So I think anyone else can make just as good of an assumption as I can on that. So I guess it's really, kind of, a guess as to what would happen with installing the other projects and doing nothing on this section. So I don't have a great answer to that.
Okay, there is a motion on the table to approve the additional traffic calming on this section of Wheeler Road from Sherman to Comanche. Is there a second? Harold, your hand is up.
Yeah, I second that.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Alderman Yazzie, your hand is still up. Did you have comment? Okay, so we have a motion to adopt the plan as proposed for this section of Wheeler Road from Sherman to Comanche as shown on the screen. Is there further discussion with regard to the proposal? And this would not include the all-way stop, correct, Tom? Correct, okay.
That's my understanding as well.
Okay, Alderman Yazzie?
Can we leave that? I guess if we approve that, can we talk about the at a later date as far as possible stop signs at Comanche and Willard?
Sure. I mean, Tom, you indicated it would need additional review to see if it met the warrants anyway, right?
Yeah, we can collect the data there to do an always stop study.
Thank you.
Okay. So, is that all you had, Alderman Yazzie?
Yes.
Okay, I'll take your hand down then. Thank you. All right. So we have a motion to approve the traffic calming as shown on the screen, the original proposal on Wheeler Road from Sherman to Comanche. Any further discussion? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote. If anyone is opposed or wishes to abstain, please raise your hand and we can do a roll call vote. I'm pausing because we have a lot of those happen on neighborhood traffic management programs. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. So the motion is approved. Okay, so now we have traffic calming all the way on Wheeler Road. Thank you, everybody. A lot of great discussion. And one of the things we've talked a lot about at the traffic calming subcommittee, at least at our last meeting, in fact, was about the impact of doing something on part of an area and not considering the impact on the whole area. So great discussion this evening. Renee, I assume you're doing ped bike enhancement projects for 2021. This is a review and feedback item.
Yes, so I have Gretchen. Yes, Gretchen Aviles Pinheiro is here with me as well. We have been working on this together. So I apologize that we were not able to get you the materials earlier. So I am going to go over things. I just have to find my next thing that I want to share here. Okay. Slideshow. Okay, so first, I know that for some of you this is new, and I wanted to go over it a little bit. I thought this would be helpful, especially as you'll hear about the traffic calming subcommittee, which is taking kind of a deep dive into the neighborhood traffic management program, which you were just reviewing, as well as this program, to consider how to make improvements going forward and So I thought it would be useful for everyone to kind of see the process, which is that we take in requests or sometimes just issues. They could come from residents. A lot of them come from alders who hear from their constituents, but they also come from staff, not just in traffic engineering, but from really departments throughout the city who may hear of something or notice something or be working on a related project. And that gets forwarded on to us. And we keep a log of those. We meet to go over all of them. We have a big staff team from various departments to look at them, look at solutions, and then I'll go over the criteria that we use to rank them. Some of you may be familiar with the racial equity and social justice tool, which was used a few years ago to help come up with our criteria and improve our process and our ranking. I will say that we also have projects that come in and we send them over to engineering because they may have a larger reconstruction or resurfacing project where something could be included. There could be also redevelopment projects that do something. So we want to ensure that, these are all just well coordinated with what's happening across the city. And this is the ranking criteria that was developed that we use at this time and which is being reviewed, as I said, as a part of the traffic calming process. But we look at safety, speed, crashes for pedestrian and bikes, fatalities for peds and bikes. We try to get at sort of the operation, the access demand. Is it near sort of schools, paths, libraries, commercial, things like that, where there would be a lot of demand generated for walking and biking, sort of connectivity improvement that this would bring. We also look at transit boardings because we know that being able to access a transit stop is vitally important as well. And we want to continue to improve those going forward. And then we score based on if it is within a neighborhood resource team area. We also look at the percent minority population and we look at the housing assistance population as a way to try to use equity in our criteria. So then with that, I am going to find in my things that are open the actual project list. Here we go. So this is broken out into two parts: safe routes to school improvements, which are ones that are making improvements for our school. And I will say this is an unusual year. We do have kind of a small request list. We were about to launch updating school travel plans when the pandemic hit and schools closed down. So we have not gotten back to that. So with schools closed, we have less requests. Most of these came from walk and bike audits that we were doing with our community school partners and from our crossing guards who had things that they had noted before school was out. So we have up here at the top some RFBs, some signage improvements, and then ped signals and flashing school signs. So as I mentioned, kind of a smaller list than you might normally see in a given year. But then, so just to clarify, in case it was confusing, if you went to the very, very bottom, you'll see that the gray ones are our neighborhood resource teams. Obviously, other ones of them scored points either for percent of minority population or for housing assistance population, but we did sort of highlight our neighborhood resource teams. We do a lot of work in those areas, so we wanted to highlight those. Everything above the red line would be funded. The other ones are, as you can kind of see from the numbers as well, ones that we did not have enough funding to move forward. And so those ones would, depending on what happens with the process, we would certainly keep them on our list. We would continue to look for opportunities to make improvements, and some of them may have other construction or development projects that come forward that would allow us to make improvements as well. Oh, and I forgot to point out one thing. It's not, I don't think everyone was here when I did the crossing guard presentation, but Old Sauk at Shuey is one of the places where a principal did request a crossing guard study. So we are just in the process of conducting our crossing guard studies now that schools are back in session in person. So I don't know if it will meet the points qualification for that, but obviously we will be coming back later to discuss those. Then we get down to just our more general ped bike improvements. I'll call out a few of them. This also includes a lot of pedestrian crossing improvements, a lot of RFBs. Fisher and Bram, which was on the Slow Streets program where we're going to trial some things. We do have some funding for that one based on the trial to make some of those changes permanent. So that is good news for that project. We do also have, you'll notice throughout this list, some bike lanes. Our bike lane projects this year would require parking removals. So we have put those pending neighborhood meetings to discuss those and see about moving those forward.
You want to move your screen, Renee? You're still on the Safe Routes to School.
Am I?
Yes. At least on mine you are.
I'm going to stop and restart because I have been moving it. All right. Do you see different numbers now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Sorry about that. So Fisher and Bram, here's that one, rated very high. Bike lanes, those all, as I mentioned, pending neighborhood meetings. We do have down here a speed reduction request that rated high enough for funding. Another one, Fish Hatchery has some parking and it has just a small gap kind of. There is some bike lanes in sections here, but not the whole way. So this would complete that. Let's see, RFBs. So here, I just wanted to explain this one. It is something that came from one of our neighborhood resource teams. It's not actually in the neighborhood resource team area, but is used by a lot of the residents. It did rank very well, but there's nothing to connect to for the crossing. So we have been working with the neighborhood resource team to kind of look at how we could create a larger project that would address the issues with access from the bus stop to the center that is being used for a lot of neighborhood activities. So we would hope that in the future, even if the program changes, we would have some opportunity to move that forward in the future as we work to kind of develop how, okay, if we get you across the street, where you're going to go, how you're going to get to your destination. And we have another bike lane one where there is a partial contraflow lane, but it does end because we need to have a neighborhood meeting to talk about removing some parking to make the full connection that is desired there. This one, it says upgrade to RFB because there is an old style flashing ball light versus the more modern rapid flash beacons that are have been found to be much better at yield compliance. So we had a request to improve that one. And another one, this particular one, Milwaukee, Fair Oaks to Woodman's, has been on the radar, I think, of this committee for a while. And that would require also some coordination with the town of Blooming Grove because that whole section is not the city of Madison, but we don't anticipate at this time that that would be an issue. Atwood, this we had met with Alder Foster. We had a lot of residents' interest in some improvements there. We know that hopefully in the near term, there's going to be a reconstruction project. The design is completed. It's just awaiting funding. So we did try to find some solution, something that we could do there in the interim period. And so we would be funding a speed reduction and the driver feedback board there as well. And then here we are looking to potentially, we would be able to fund this one at a slightly lower rate, which would be able to make the cut then. We anticipate that we will have some RFB that is used potentially at Blair and Maine or with the BRT project that we would then repurposed from a site where it is no longer needed because new equipment or potentially a signal is added. And then we would remove it and put it up in this location. And then obviously this year, other than Safe Routes to School, where I would say we had a few less requests with school not being in session, we did have, as you can see, we had a very large number of requests this year. And so we were not able to get as far down the list as obviously I would love to be able to get down and do a lot more of these projects. We weren't, the Spike Boulevard on Darbo Drive, it did not go down low enough to fund that. So we would need to grapple with how we would fund those permanent solutions once we work on that project through Slow Streets. And I know that, I'll just keep going here. There's a few, this one on here, Glenway at Speedway, we are working with engineering. We discovered that they have a project that is coming up to that intersection. So I do think we're be able to fund that through there, but obviously not all of these are kind of in that situation. So I'll just keep going down here. There is quite an extensive list, and I will stop sharing for now and take discussion, questions, I guess.
Yes, we're here for review and feedback. So what feedback do you have for Renee?
Before that is one piece of information that I would like to add.
Go ahead, Yang.
As Renee mentioned that the funding for this year's program is not as big as a typical year, as largely because we have been using the leftover money from the neighborhood traffic management program to supplement these two programs. You all know that we received over 120 traffic calming requests. So we did a lot of projects that we were rolling out all of projects for traffic calming as you all approved, and that used up all the funding from that account. So as a result, the money for this year's program are limited. That's why we had to stop where we stop instead of going further down to the list. But I'm having some conversation with city engineer Rob Phillips, and trying to see whether the city has money somewhere to help us a little bit here this year. And if so, we're just moving down the list. Obviously, the ranking will be the same. Depending on how much money additional money we can have. We're just moving further down the list. So hopefully some of the lighter color fronts will become dark color ones down the road. So just want to update the commission on that. Thank you.
Good, thanks. Alder Foster, go ahead.
Thank you. Just to piggyback on that, that's one of the recommendations from the traffic calming subcommittee is going to be to combine those two funds into sort of one program, which I think will be good to make sure that we are able to fund the kind of highest value projects, regardless of where they come in and which side of those programs. But either way, it looks like we've got like $850,000 worth of really worthwhile projects just in the Ped Bike program that aren't funded. This year, obviously, there were plenty of other projects in the traffic management also that we weren't able to fund. I'm mostly just calling that out for my older colleagues as we're, going into our next budget season. We were able to add $500,000 on an annual basis for Vision Zero funding, which is very much related in the same wheelhouse of these kinds of improvements. So I think it's something for us as alders to bring up at the Common Council. And when we're really thinking about where we want to spend our money, I know for my residents, there's nothing that they care more about than traffic calming and safe streets and safe crossings, et cetera. So call out how much need there still is, but the list and the work around it looks really great. So thanks, staff, for all your work on
it. Chris, go ahead. We can't hear you, Chris.
Thanks. Sorry, I get double mute myself sometimes. Yeah. Also, thanks for the work on this. It looks good. I just had kind of a process question, which was in the flow chart, Renee. It kind of looks like you go through alternatives or solutions before ranking them, even though I don't think that affects the ranking at all. Although I get the impression that there's some sort of like informal feasibility sort of calculation that goes into it. Can you talk about that briefly? I guess the question is, why are the solutions come before the ranking from behind the scenes?
Sure. And I would say, obviously the solutions are sort of like once they're ranked, they're much more planned out, but there is in the sort of consideration of improving the connectivity, what we're proposing does have an impact on that score, knowing that just putting up a sign is not going to have the same impact as other things. So we do try to take that into consideration. So we need to have at least kind of a general idea of something. And I don't know, Gretchen, if you want to add to that.
I mean, that's exactly right. We get the possible project, the improvement, and depending on what it is, like Renee mentioned, are we either making it better or creating a new crossing or a new way to access? So we use that to rank the projects and that connectivity part.
And then the other part is that we do, try to look, some projects have a scope that would take out our entire budget. So, obviously some things come in and they may need just additional, like a higher level of engineering or survey work. And so we do try to, since the engineering department is a part of the team, kind of work with them to see if that's something that we might be able to fit into a different program, or to have them do like a higher level of engineering work on, and then it would come back as a project for one of the programs later.
So there are projects that didn't actually make it onto this list for that reason, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Like
else or something.
Like there's a connection from the Goodman Pool to the Winger Creek path, for instance, that came in, but it really felt like this is going to need some additional engineering work, some surveying. And so now it's potentially going to be in the Bikeways program for 2022 as they kind of can get that survey work done.
Thank you.
Carl, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the work on that. And yeah, it's unfortunately that we can't fund everything, but yeah, lots of exciting stuff on there. I guess just one observation is that once you get to that cutoff point, I mean, things look really close. Like, we have two projects, both with 29 points, one being funded, one not being funded. And then, we have 28, 27, 26. So, I mean, if you have any reason to take a closer look at any of those particular ones and make a good case why maybe one with 26 is more worthwhile than one with 29. I mean, I think the commission would probably be open to that. And maybe one way to assess that is, I know safety features into the scoring to some extent, but just taking a look at whether any of these projects are part of the high injury network might be one way to help, this. We know this is on the high injury network and maybe didn't make the cutoff because there were too few fatalities in this ranking, but maybe that's an argument for still ranking it a little bit higher without making any comments on any of the particular projects. I mean, what we have on there, this seems all great and hopefully we can fund more from later. Thanks.
Yeah. Great. So at this point, this is just for here for review and recommendation. So we don't need approval from TC. I'm correct on that, right, Yang?
You're correct, Ann.
Okay. So, Bill, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm supportive of the projects, and I just you asked for comments, and I'm going to give them to you on Whitney Way. Between Raymond and the Beltline. Renee, do you know of a speed study has been done? How many speed studies have been done over the years? And how many times test units have been on Whitney Way? It'd be worth asking tests to see how many times they've been out there. The speed limit right now is 30, and I'm going to say that test doesn't have any trouble at all writing tickets on that stretch whenever time they're out there. So 25 is going to be a real challenge, and I suspect we will hear about that from people thinking we're trying to, just, I don't know. We're looking for places to issue tickets on, more tickets, and that's not the purpose. It's trying to slow that traffic down. It's just way too fast, and pedestrians don't have a chance of crossing that street. Even with we have some RFPs out there, and so it's just, and some other activities have been, traffic has gone and tried to do some things out there, but it is a tough street. It's got a grade, for one thing. Northbound traffic has got a significant, and you're gonna have to, people have to put their brakes on just to go down to 30. So 25 is going to be really tough in that stretch. So I think it's good that we try, but we're going to have this is not the 20 is plenty thing. So I think, to really make this work, we're going to have help with police to do the enforcement on this stretch, because it is an arterial. So thanks.
Hey, any other comments? Okay, thanks very much, Renee. A lot of good stuff tonight. All right, next, Tom Lynch is here to talk about some responses that he drafted to the questions and discussion we had last time. The draft request for proposal for racial equity, bias, and inclusion training was here. So we'd like to talk about the responses, and we'd like to talk about moving forward with the RFP. Tom, go ahead. You're muted, Tom. There you go.
Yeah, sorry. I apologize. My wife is also on the phone, so I'm adjusting for both things. As I said, I believe that the responses to the questions and the good discussion that occurred at the Transportation Commission are pretty much self-explanatory. The focus of this is really to address inner committee dynamics and how we listen. We had a similar type of training with the mayor's management team, and it was focused not so much on issues, but how we approach issues. So it's rather than this being a reproducible thing that can be done anywhere, it ended up being more of a personal development thing, which means that yes, this type of training might need to be done again in 3 or 4 years. But I think there was still value. I feel like I grew as a result of this type of training, and I think there's value in it. We have had comments from people of color regarding some of our board and commission meetings over the past 2.5 years. And so this just tries to address that and walk in this with integrity. I would like, if it's acceptable, or the answers are acceptable, I'd like to go ahead and move forward with this, and so we can issue an RFP. Right now, it's kind of strange. There are a lot of organizations that are, I guess, suddenly recognizing that they don't have a full awareness of how they interact on the basis of race, and so consultants that help organizations with this are actually quite busy right now. It's 2 years ago they weren't as busy, but right now they are. So I would like to move forward. I'm here to answer any questions if anyone else has some.
So before we move into discussion, Tom Wilson is here, who's the chair of the Transportation Policy and Planning Board. Of course, Alder Foster is also on the Transportation Policy and Planning Board, but as an alder, he is able to participate in our discussion. I would ask that someone make a motion to suspend the rules and allow Tom to participate in the discussion on this item. Ken and Bridget, we have a motion.
So
and
moved.
Okay. And Bridget, I assume that's a second? A second? Okay. So is there any discussion on the motion? All those in, I'll assume, Ken, did you have or
No.
take your name down? Okay, great. Thanks. We'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anyone is opposed. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, so now as we talk about it, Tom, please feel free to participate and ask questions, make comments, etc. And of course, Alder Foster as well. So what comments do we have? I think Tom did a great job of addressing the concerns that we expressed last time around. And we have all indicated an interest and a willingness to participate in this kind of training. So what other comments and questions do you have? And if you don't have any, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the draft RFP so we can move forward.
Yeah, just real briefly, this is something the board has widely supported. So yeah, I hope everyone can support it.
Thank you. Bridget.
Yeah, I'd just like to move approval of the proposal.
Okay, there's a motion. Alder Miazzi.
I'm sorry, who's all on this committee? I'm sorry, just out of curiosity.
In terms of the transportation?
The one, yes, that does this analysis or I'm sorry, I'm a little bit confused on what you guys are that who all works on this workshop that you guys are talking about.
Okay. So the Transportation Commission and the Transportation Policy and Planning Board have had people bring forward the need for more diversity on our boards and more inclusion in how we go about reaching our decisions. And we did we had a lot of discussion about this in a small group. And then we also had a discussion at a joint meeting of both the Transportation Commission and the Transportation, Policy and Planning Board. And the result of that was Tom Lynch working with folks in the city to come up with a request for proposal to bring us the first step in training that would address some of the concerns that were expressed. And we continue to work with the mayor's office in terms of making sure that we have diversity on the actual board and commission as well. So does that address your question, Alder Miazzi? Tom, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, maybe I'll give a background. So what the RFP would be for a group to come in and workshops with a joint meetings of the commission and board to help us understand how we interact with race in both our deliberations and our listening and our decision making. Types of groups that do this include like Annette Miller with Equity by Design. She did something like this with the Sustainability Committee. Jacqueline Bogus, who I have pretty high regard for. She's with Nina Group. And so the focus isn't so much more on equity in transportation, but more equity in how when we hear testimony, how do we listen to that? How do we consider that? How do we not talk over that? How do we interact, understanding that? And so it's we did something similar in Mayor's management team. I it was not cookie cutter. Every session built on the previous session. I was impressed by, I think, the value it brought to everyone in the meeting. I felt like, all right, I'm just going to, do you mind if I'm going to speak as a white person, right? Because I am, but I don't realize how my white supremacy thinking influences the way I talk in a group, talk over people, how I view an issue. And oftentimes I will think that people view things similarly to the way I view them. And this training kind of helped me understand there's a lot of different ways that this could be looked for. And sometimes, I'm not sure what the conclusions will be by the consultant with that. But, one of my takeaways is that sometimes inclusion and eliminating bias in a committee setting sometimes means slowing down, because sometimes you have to go slow to hear all voices. Mm-hmm. Yang was part of this too. I believe Yang felt it was a value also. Is that he's nodding his head. So I suspect that the key point for these committees will be different than what it was for the management. Mm-hmm. I do feel like it had high value.
Good. Does that help give you the background you need, Elder Miazzi?
Yes, that was perfect.
Okay, thanks. Ken, you're next.
Second the motion that Bridget made.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second discussion. Alder Miazzi, your hand's back up, or no? Okay.
Sorry.
It's no problem. Chris, go ahead.
I just wanted to say real quick, thanks to Tom for answering the questions and massaging the RFP, since you weren't here when we talked about it quite a bit. And the answers are all really helpful and it looks great. So thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Harold, you're next.
Yeah, same. Wanted to say thank you. I did want to raise that one logistical point, and I'm not sure if that needs to be sorted out before the RFP. I think the proposal is basically to do this before our regular commission meetings. And I don't know if we have to get to that level of detail, but I think for some of us with day jobs before that, I think that might be challenging to make that happen. Thanks.
Yeah, Tom, didn't you add something about the flexibility of the timing?
Yeah, I think I did, but I'll make sure that I did do that. That was one concept, but I fully appreciate the need for people that work to be able to go to work, and so we, I think that talking with these providers is they didn't seem to think that we could just do one long 4 or 5 hour session.
Yeah.
That it would have to be in installments, but how we arrange those installments can be just determined later.
Yeah, he added something, Harold, that says the time and format of the meetings will be determined at a later date. So we will try very hard to work around that issue. So it won't accomplish what we want to accomplish if people can't come. So clearly, so we'll work hard on that. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing no hands up. I will assume unanimous consent approval unless anyone is opposed or wishes to abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing no hands, the motion is carried. And thank you so much, Tom, for all the time that you have spent working on this. It's a really important initiative, and we all very much appreciate it. So thanks so much. Next on the agenda, we have the crossover report from the members of the Transportation Policy and Planning Board. And, Tom Wilson is here too. So Tom, you're welcome to hop in here. We have Chris and Alder Harrington McKinney, who wants to give us any updates on what's been going on at TPPV. Chris, go ahead.
I did not get a chance to look back over since, as you know, I was running a little late to today's meeting. So if anyone else wants to jump in, including Tom, feel free.
Tom, we don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you have any thoughts about either what's happened or where TPPB is headed. Either Tom.
Was that?
Either Tom Lynch or Tom Wilson. We always have a brief update on what's been going on in the Transportation Policy and Planning Board. Actually, you prepared a report that, Patrick, if I didn't ask you to send that out to the TC, we can forward that out to the TC, and that'll give everybody a really good look at what's been going on at the policy board and where it's headed.
I'll give a minute and 30 seconds. At our next meeting, we'll talk about some of the background analysis for complete green streets. I felt like it was very interesting. I think Tool Design provided a lot of very interesting graphics that will serve as kind of a basis as how we approach that. We are on the agenda is also a capital budget. We'll just do a preview of the capital budget for transportation. This is probably one of the most important capital budgets that we've had in several years, because this will be the one where we approve the funding for BRT. And if we don't approve the funding for BRT, then we may not have BRT. And then the network redesign last week had a series of workshops on route alternatives. It was very, I think, interactive between staff members and consultant staff, with some summaries to policymakers in the evenings. And I believe the product of that work will be coming to TPPB late June, July.
Okay, thanks. Chris, go ahead.
Yes, I can now add very briefly a couple other things that might interest folks. Is the Vision Zero action plan deadline was extended to March of 2022, just so that folks could spend more time working that through. And then we saw a Metro Fare study from Justin, and that will, some form of that will eventually have to come here, because there's a potential for that to influence how fares are charged, and some neat suggestions that came up there. So folks can look at that if they're interested.
Yeah, we can maybe, Patrick, we can send links out to both of those things. The report that Tom gave and the fare study were both at the last TPP meeting. So perhaps we could send a link out to the commission and they can take a look at those, the decks that were included in Legistar, and watch the video if they'd like. Any other comments? Tom Wilson, go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick, I stepped away from my laptop so I could hear you, but I couldn't get back to it in time. But anyway, yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add on what Tom and Chris said. We're going to be looking at a work plan here in the coming months, and we continue to track kind of our major policy issues. We'll be hearing a bit from Chris and Alder Foster, I think, on Monday about the work of the parking subgroup that we've had for the past couple of months. So, making some progress on potential changes to parking policy as well. So that's really all I've got to add. Thanks.
Sure. Tom Lynch?
Yeah, this maybe is somewhat of an advertisement, but tomorrow there's a joint session between TPPB and the Planning Commission regarding transportation demand management. An important initiative. There's only really a handful of cities. Well, there's more than a handful, but it's a growing issue among cities in the United States. I actually believe that there'll be a press release tomorrow regarding it as well. So.
Yeah, I plan to come and observe, and it's a ton of information in Legistar about it. So if you're interested, there's a lot of great information in there. Harold.
Will that meeting be recorded for those of us who can't make the actual meeting? That would be really great.
Plan Commission is, I believe, is it not?
Yeah, it's recorded and streamed live and on the channel tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. Next, we have an update on the traffic calming subcommittee. We spent the last meeting discussing project prioritization and evaluation criteria, and Harold and Tom Wilson did put a lot of work into bringing something forward. We had a lot of great discussion about it, so we decided we need another meeting to talk about it. So we actually look to be adding 2 meetings, I think, into our schedule in order to try and meet that July 15th deadline. So a lot of great work on that subcommittee, and one that I really enjoyed being part of. Does anybody else on the subcommittee have any other comments or updates? Okay. In terms of announcements by the chair, we still have 2 vacancies on the commission. I continue to stay in touch with the mayor's office with regard to that. In terms of, that's all I had. I didn't have any other announcements. Future agenda items are in Legistar. Yang emailed me and added bike registration program update for as likely for the May 26th meeting as well. And then future topics are shown down below. Does anybody have anything else that we're not tracking that we need to add to the list? Hey, we have a lot going on, and one of the things that we'll be looking at in June is our annual work plan. So good opportunity for us to take a look at that. All right, I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn. Harold.
Move adjournment.
And Bill?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. I'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anyone is opposed. And thank you, everybody. Great meeting tonight. I see no hands, so we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.